I used to think RV parks were the safest kind of alone. Not the kind of alone where you're truly isolated, like deep woods or a desert highway. More like, you're surrounded by people, but you still get your privacy. You park your rig, you put down the leveling blocks, you plug in your power, and you close your door. Then you're in your own little bubble. That's what I told myself when I started traveling for contract work. I was 27 and doing seasonal maintenance jobs, roof repairs, small electrical work, general labor. The kind of work that pays decently if you're willing to bounce around. I bought a used travel trailer that smelled faintly like cigarettes no matter how much I scrubbed, and I hit the road. In late October, I took a job near a lake in a small town I'd never heard of. The area had one main grocery store, one gas station, and a diner that looked like it had been built the same year as the highway. The RV park I picked was cheap and open year-round. It sat near a tree line, just off a two-lane road that went quiet after sunset. The office closed at 5. After that, you were on your own. When I checked in, the manager, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, slid a paper map across the counter. "Spot 24, she said. I nodded. "Any rules I should know?" She didn't smile. "Lock your stuff. Don't leave anything out. People come through sometimes." "People?" She paused like she was choosing her words. "Not campers." That was the whole warning. Spot 24 was near the back, where the gravel turned to dirt and the trees pressed closer. There were only a few other rigs around. Most sites were empty, probably because winter was coming. That first night, I cooked ramen on my tiny stove and watched the last bit of daylight die through the blinds. I remember feeling oddly calm. The trailer creaked a little in the cooling air, and the wind made the branches brush together like whispering. Around 10, I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and put on a podcast. My phone volume was low. I didn't want to be the kind of camper who blasted sound through thin walls. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is a sharp knock. Not loud. Not pounding. Just a knock. 3 taps, like someone at an apartment door. I froze in bed, staring into the darkness. The trailer was quiet except for the hum of the heater. Then I heard it again, 3 knocks. I sat up slowly. My heart was already doing that stupid thing where it tries to punch through your ribs. "Hello?" I called, keeping my voice steady. No answer. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and grabbed my phone. The screen lit up the cramped space in pale blue. 11:47 p.m. 3 more taps. This time, they weren't on the main door. They were on the side of the trailer, right beside my bed. I didn't move. I couldn't. It's hard to explain how personal that feels when someone knocks right next to your head. It's not like a normal door knock. It's like they know exactly where you are. I whispered, "Who is it?" Still nothing. I slid out of bed and tiptoed to the front, careful not to make the floor creak too much. I reached up and flipped on the porch light switch. The outside light came on, washing the small patch of dirt by my steps in yellow. I peeked through the blind covering the door window. No one was there. Just my steps, the gravel, and the dark line of trees. I stared for a full minute, waiting for movement. Nothing. No footsteps. No rustling. No shadow slipping away. The knocking had stopped. For a while I stood there, trying to decide if I was being paranoid. Maybe it was a branch. Maybe the trailer had shifted. But branches don't knock 3 times in a pattern. I turned off the porch light and went back to bed. I tried to laugh it off in my head. You're tired. You're alone. Your brain is playing tricks. I was just starting to relax when it happened again. 3 taps. Same spot beside the bed. This time I heard something else with it, a soft scraping sound, like fingernails dragging along metal. I sat up so fast I got dizzy. Then, very quietly, I heard a voice outside. Not a normal speaking voice. A whisper that was too close. Open up. The words weren't shouted. They weren't angry. They were calm, like someone asking you to pass the salt. My throat went dry. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe. Open up, the voice whispered again, slower. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers and tapped the flashlight on. The beam swept across the trailer walls, the cabinets, the narrow aisle. It felt ridiculous, shining a phone light inside when the threat was outside, but it gave my hands something to do. Then I heard another voice. A different one. This voice was lower, and it didn't whisper. It spoke at a normal volume, like it didn't care if anyone heard. Stop messing around, it said. He ain't opening. The first voice made a small sound, almost like a laugh. Then the knocking shifted. It moved from beside my bed to the front door. 3 taps again. And then, right after, the door handle jiggled. Not hard. Not enough to rattle the whole door. Just a careful test, like someone checking if it was locked. It was locked. I always locked it. The handle jiggled again. Then the deadbolt clicked. Or at least, I thought it did. A cold wave went through me as I realized what I was hearing wasn't the lock turning from the inside. It was the sound of someone pushing something into the lock. I crept forward, phone flashlight off now, because I didn't want to advertise where I was. I moved like I was in a house with sleeping people, like the walls might complain if I stepped too loud. I pressed my eye to the blind. 2 silhouettes stood on my steps. One was tall and thin. The other was wider, wearing what looked like a hoodie. Their faces were turned down toward the lock. The tall one leaned close to the door and whispered, "Come on, come on!" And then, like he'd felt my gaze, he slowly lifted his head. Even through the blind, I could tell he was looking right at the window. He couldn't see me clearly, not with the light off. But he knew where to look. He smiled. I will never forget that smile because it wasn't threatening in the normal way. It was pleased. Like he was enjoying a game. I backed away so fast my shoulder hit the wall. I didn't call out. I didn't yell. I did the only thing I could think of. I hit my phone and dialed 911. My hands were so sweaty my thumbs slipped twice. The call connected, and the operator answered in a sleepy voice. I whispered my location and tried to sound calm. "Someone's trying to get into my RV." She asked me questions, and I tried to answer without raising my voice. While she talked, the sounds outside stopped. No more lock-picking. No more whispering. Just silence. The operator said, "Officers are on the way. Stay inside. Keep your doors locked." I stared at the door like it might open on its own. Then I heard footsteps. Not running, walking away, slow and unbothered. Like they had all night. When the police arrived, their lights painted the trees blue and red. I stepped outside shaking, feeling stupid and relieved at the same time. The officers checked around my site with flashlights. They found footprints near the steps. They found a cigarette butt. They found nothing else. one officer shone his light on my door lock and said, "Looks like someone tried." I asked if this happened often. He glanced at the other officer before answering. "Enough." I didn't sleep after that. I kept every light on and sat with my back against the wall, listening for the smallest sound. The next morning, I went to the office the second it opened. The manager looked at my face and didn't ask questions. She just nodded like she already knew. "You can move closer to the front," she said. I thanked her and started walking out, but then I turned back. "Who are they?" I asked. She stared at the counter a moment before she said, "They're not campers." That night, I moved my trailer to a spot near the office where there were more rigs around. I thought that would solve it. I thought I'd be safer in the cluster of people. I was wrong. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard 3 soft knocks on my new trailer wall, right beside my bed, and a whisper through the thin aluminum, calm as ever. "Open up." This happened to my friend Rachel, but I was there for the aftermath, and it still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Rachel was doing a cross-country trip with her boyfriend at the time. They had a small Class C motorhome, big enough to sleep, cook, and shower, but not so big it felt like a bus. They liked quiet parks. Cheaper, less crowded, more authentic, as Rachel put it. They found a campground online that looked perfect. Lots of trees. Near a river. Reviews said it was peaceful. The only thing the reviews mentioned, almost as a joke, was that you should ignore the empty site. Rachel laughed when she told me that. "Like, what does that even mean?" she said. They arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. The campground was almost empty. Just a couple of long-term campers at the front, and one older couple near the bathrooms. The office was a small building with a porch and an "open" sign that looked like it hadn't been changed in years. A man in a faded shirt handed them a keycard for the shower and pointed them toward their site. "Site 12, he said. "You'll be fine." Rachel asked, "What's with the reviews about an empty site?" His eyes didn't move much, but his mouth tightened. "People talk," he said. That was it. Site 12 was along a loop road near the river. Site 11 next to it was weird. It looked maintained, gravel raked, fire ring clean, picnic table wiped down. But there was no RV, no tent, nothing. Just emptiness that felt staged, like someone had cleared it out but kept it ready. Rachel's boyfriend, Mark, joked, "Reserved for Bigfoot." They set up, cooked dinner, and watched the sun go down through the trees. That night, Rachel said she woke up because Mark was sitting up in bed staring out the front window. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Mark didn't answer right away. His face was pale in the dim light. Finally he said, "There's someone outside." Rachel's stomach dropped. She scooted forward and peeked around the curtain. A figure stood at the edge of their site, near the post with the site number on it. Just standing there. The figure didn't move. It looked like a person in a jacket, hood up, hands in pockets. Mark whispered, "Maybe it's someone who's lost." Rachel wanted to believe that. So she tapped the horn button on the steering wheel, just a quick beep. The figure didn't react. Mark grabbed a flashlight and shone it through the window. The light hit the figure's face, and Rachel said her brain did something strange. It refused to process what she was seeing. Because the face wasn't normal. It was too still. Too smooth. Like a mask pulled tight. The figure turned its head slightly, slowly, and then the flashlight beam caught the shine of plastic. Rachel's breath caught. Is that? Mark whispered. It's a mask. The figure stood there for another 10 seconds. Then it took one step back into the darkness. And vanished. They didn't sleep much after that. They kept the curtains closed, and the doors locked. Mark held a tire iron like it was going to save him from a person wearing a mask in the woods. In the morning, they walked outside to look for footprints. There were none. No prints in the gravel. No scuffs. Nothing. Rachel tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some local kid. Mark wasn't laughing. He kept staring at Site 11. Because on the picnic table in that empty site, there was something that hadn't been there the night before. A folded chair. The kind you bring to sit by a campfire. It was open and positioned facing Site 12. Facing their motorhome. Rachel said her skin crawled when she saw it. It's like someone was watching us. Mark marched over to the chair and picked it up. It felt warm, like it had been sitting in sunlight, even though the sun had barely risen. He threw it into the empty fire ring like he was angry. They decided to leave that day. They told themselves it was a fluke, a weird camper, some prank. But before they could unhook their hose and pack up, the older couple from near the bathrooms walked by with a dog. The woman looked at Rachel's face and said, "You saw him, didn't you?" Rachel froze. "Saw who?" The woman didn't look surprised. She nodded towards Site 11. "The empty site," she said. Mark stepped closer. "What is that? Why is it empty?" The older man sighed like he'd answered this question 100 times. "It's not supposed to be," he said. Rachel asked, "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then said, "A guy used to camp there. Alone. Stayed too long. People said he watched them. Took pictures. Followed kids around. Management told him to leave." Rachel's throat tightened. "So he left?" The woman shook her head slightly. "They found him there one morning," she said quietly. "In his chair. Looking right at the next site over." Rachel asked, "Dead?" The man nodded. "Been years. But people still see him." Rachel didn't want to hear more. She just wanted to get out. They packed up fast. As they were pulling out, Rachel glanced at Site 11 one last time. And she saw the chair again. Not the one Mark threw into the fire ring. This one was set up in the exact same spot as before, facing Site 12. And someone was sitting in it. A figure in a jacket, hood up, head tilted slightly. When Rachel looked closer, she saw the shine of a plastic face. A mask. She screamed, and Mark hit the gas. The motorhome bounced over the gravel and shot out of the loop road like they were fleeing a crime scene. They didn't stop until they hit the main highway. Rachel called the campground office from the road and told the man what they saw. The man didn't sound confused. He didn't even sound alarmed. He just said, "You should have ignored the empty site." That night, they stayed in a truck stop parking lot under bright lights, surrounded by semi-trucks. Rachel slept with her phone in her hand. At 3:12 a.m., she got a notification. A new message request on a social app she barely used. No profile picture. No name. Just a blank account. The message contained one thing. A photo. It was a picture of their motorhome parked at Site 12. Taken from Site 11. And in the reflection of their front window, you could just barely see a pale plastic face pressed close from inside, like the photographer had been standing right outside their door while they slept. Rachel deleted the app. But she told me weeks later she still sometimes gets notifications from new blank accounts, always late at night, always with no message. Just a photo icon that disappears before she can open it. If you've ever stayed at a campground with shared bathrooms, you already know the feeling. It doesn't matter how clean the place is. It doesn't matter how many families are around during the day. At night, walking to a campground bathroom feels like volunteering to be in a horror movie. This was a few years ago when I was traveling for work like I mentioned earlier. I'd stopped at a larger RV campground that had a mix of short-term travelers and long-term residents. The kind of place where some rigs had little porches and potted plants, like they'd been there for years. I arrived late and got one of the last open sites near the back. The bathroom building was a decent walk away, maybe 5 minutes if you took the main path. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. with that specific kind of panic that only comes when your bladder decides it's an emergency. I didn't want to go. I seriously considered using the tiny trailer bathroom, but my trailer's tank sensors were broken and I'd been trying to avoid filling it. So I put on my shoes, grabbed my phone, and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to sting. The campground was almost silent except for a far-off generator hum and the occasional creak of trees. I turned on my phone flashlight and started walking. The main path was lit by a few weak lamp posts. Their light barely reached the ground, leaving pockets of darkness between them. About halfway to the bathrooms, I noticed someone else walking ahead of me. At first, it was just a shape moving under the next lamp post. A person in a hoodie, hands in pockets, head down. I felt a small wave of relief. Okay, I thought. Someone else is awake. I'm not alone out here. Then something about the way they walked made my stomach tighten. They weren't walking toward the bathroom building. They were walking away from it. Toward the back of the campground. Toward me. I slowed down instinctively, letting them approach while I stayed under the lamp post's light. The person kept coming, head still down. As they got closer, I realized they were barefoot. No shoes. No socks. Just pale feet on cold gravel. That should have made me stop right there and turn around. But my brain did the thing it always does, tried to make a normal explanation. Maybe they're drunk, I thought. Maybe they lost their shoes. When they were about 20 feet away, they stopped. They stood just outside the circle of light. I couldn't see their face under the hood. Just darkness where a face should be. I cleared my throat. Hey, I called. You okay? They didn't answer. I took a step back without meaning to. Then the person lifted their head slowly. What I saw under the hood was wrong. It was a face, but it was too pale, too flat, like it had no blood in it. The eyes looked open, but they didn't reflect light normally. They looked like glass marbles set into a mannequin. My flashlight shook in my hand. The person's mouth opened slightly, and I heard a sound that didn't match what I was seeing. It sounded like a child trying to speak through clenched teeth. Bathroom, the voice said. I swallowed hard. I pointed behind me, forcing myself to talk. It's that way. The person didn't move. Just stared. Then, very quietly, they said, "Walk with me." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Something about the way they asked wasn't friendly. It wasn't scared. It was expecting obedience. I shook my head. No, I'm going there, I said, trying to keep my voice normal. The person tilted their head slightly like they were confused by the concept of refusal. Walk, they repeated, voice still sounding wrong. I took another step back, and my heel hit a rock. It scraped loudly. The sound seemed to echo in the campground. At that noise, the person's posture changed. Their shoulders lifted slightly. Their hands came out of their pockets. And I realized their fingers were dirty, black under the nails, like they'd been digging in soil. They took one step forward into the light. The hood slipped back just enough for me to see their hair. Or what I thought was hair. It looked more like thin strands stuck to their scalp, uneven, like something that had been pulled out and put back wrong. I didn't wait for my brain to process it. I turned and ran. I ran back the way I came, phone flashlight bouncing wildly, breath burning in my throat. I didn't look behind me. I didn't want to. But I heard footsteps. Bare feet slapping gravel behind me, too fast, too close. I sprinted toward my trailer, heart exploding, fingers fumbling for my keys. I reached my door, yanked it open, and threw myself inside, slamming it shut and locking it with shaking hands. The footsteps stopped outside. For a few seconds there was silence. Then I heard the softest sound, fingertips dragging along the side of my trailer, moving from the door toward the window near my bed. I backed away, holding my phone like a weapon. The dragging stopped right beside the window. And then came 3 gentle taps. Tap. 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 I stood frozen, staring at the thin wall. A voice, that same childlike wrong voice, whispered, "Walk with me." I didn't call the police. I should have. But I didn't. I sat awake until sunrise with every light on, listening for any sound. When morning came, I went straight to the office. The clerk, a young guy with a tired face, listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly like he'd heard it before. "Was it barefoot?" he asked. My stomach turned. "Yeah," he sighed. "We had someone like that show up last winter," he said. "Guy said it was his kid at first. Then he admitted he didn't have kids." I asked what happened. The clerk looked away toward the window. "They found a little tent down by the creek," he said. "Empty. But there were toys inside. Like someone was trying to make it look normal." I left that campground immediately. I drove for 2 hours before I pulled over. I told myself I was safe. I told myself it was just a weird person, maybe mentally ill, maybe a vagrant. Then my phone buzzed. A new photo had appeared in my camera roll. I hadn't taken it. I hadn't screenshotted anything. It was a picture of me standing outside my trailer door, taken from the darkness near the tree line. In the bottom corner of the photo, barely visible, was a pale face under a hood. And the caption typed across the image in plain text: "Next time walk." Long-term campers can be friendly. Sometimes they're the best part of a park, people who know the area, who share tools, who keep an eye out. But sometimes, long-term campers act like the campground is their private territory. And sometimes, they act like you're not supposed to be there. This was told to me by a coworker named Eddie. He was a quiet guy who didn't exaggerate, which is why I believed him. Eddie traveled with his wife, Lisa, and their small dog. They stayed in a park outside a desert town, wide open spaces, dusty wind, the kind of sky that looks enormous at night. They planned to stay a week. The first day was normal. They set up, took the dog for a walk, waved at neighbors. Their neighbor across the gravel lane was an older man living in a fifth wheel. His rig had tarps hanging off the sides like patched skin. He had wind chimes that didn't sound cheerful, more like clinking bones. The man introduced himself as Ray. Ray spoke softly, like he didn't waste words. He asked where they were from, how long they were staying, and if they'd ever been there before. Lisa said no. Ray nodded once and said, "Don't walk out past the fence after dark." Eddie laughed lightly. "Coyotes?" Ray stared at him for a long moment before saying, "Something like that." That night, Eddie and Lisa heard scratching under their RV. It wasn't constant. It came and went, like something circling beneath them. Their dog growled low, hair standing up. Eddie tapped the floor with a broom handle. The scratching stopped. An hour later it started again. Eddie finally got fed up, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. He looked under the RV. Nothing. No animal, no movement, no eyes reflecting. But he saw something that made his stomach twist. There were handprints in the dirt. Not animal tracks, handprints. Like someone had been crawling under the RV, palms pressing into dust. Eddie told Lisa they should leave in the morning. Lisa agreed. They tried to sleep, but around 3 a.m. they woke to a new sound. A soft tapping on their door. Not knocking. Tapping. Like someone's fingernail gently tapping the plastic window. Tap, tap, tap. Eddie got out of bed, heart pounding, and looked through the blind. Ray was standing on their steps. Just standing there, face calm, hands at his sides. Eddie cracked the door, keeping the chain latched. "Ray," he whispered. "What are you doing?" Ray looked past Eddie into the RV like he was checking something inside. "You got something under there," Ray said quietly. Eddie's mouth went dry. "Under where?" Ray's eyes shifted downward. "Under your rig," he said. "It followed you in." Eddie wanted to shut the door. Every instinct screamed to shut it. But Ray's tone wasn't playful. It wasn't drunk. It was serious in a way that made Eddie listen. "What are you talking about?" Eddie whispered. Ray leaned closer to the crack in the door. His face was lit by the RV's interior light, making the wrinkles look deeper. "I heard it," Ray said. "Scratching. It wants you to come out." Eddie swallowed. "What is it?" Ray's lips twitched like he almost smiled. "Don't matter what it is," he said. "Matters what it does." Eddie asked. "Why are you telling us this?" Ray's eyes lifted to Eddie's face. "Because it'll try me next," he said simply. Eddie shut the door and locked it. He didn't tell Lisa what Ray said. He just told her they were leaving at sunrise. They lay awake holding hands, listening. Around 4 a.m., the scratching started again. This time it was louder, more desperate, like nails dragging hard against metal. Their dog barked, then yelped and backed away trembling. Eddie said it sounded like something was trying to rip its way inside. Then it stopped. Silence so heavy it felt like pressure in the ears. And then came a new sound, slow footsteps circling the RV. Not on gravel. On dirt. Soft, careful steps. And with each step, Eddie heard a faint clicking noise, like joints snapping, like something walking wrong. The footsteps stopped at the door. A voice spoke from outside. It didn't sound like Ray. It sounded like Lisa. Soft and close, right outside the thin wall. "Eddie," the voice said gently. "Open up. I'm locked out." Lisa's grip tightened on Eddie's arms so hard it hurt. Because Lisa was right beside him, frozen, eyes wide, silently shaking her head. The voice outside repeated, "Eddie, open up." Then it added something Lisa would say, something personal. "Come on," the voice said, laughing softly. "You know I can't sleep without you." Eddie said he felt like he was going to throw up. He forced himself to stay silent. The voice waited. Then it changed. It dropped lower, rougher, like it was getting tired of pretending. "Open," it said. A hard thud hit the door, making the whole RV shake. Another thud. Then scraping, like something dragging along the door seam. Eddie called 911. He whispered their site number, shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. While he was on the phone, the sound stopped again. The operator told him deputies were coming. Minutes passed. Then Eddie heard footsteps outside, 2 sets. He looked through a window and saw Ray walking toward their RV with a flashlight in one hand and something long in the other. A shovel. Ray stopped near the front of Eddie's rig and shone the light down. He shouted something Eddie couldn't hear. Then Ray stepped back fast. And Eddie saw why. Something moved under the RV, too low to the ground, too fast, like a person crawling but with the wrong proportions. Ray swung the shovel down hard. There was a wet sound. Ray swung again. Then the movement stopped. Deputies arrived a few minutes later, dust kicking up behind their truck. They searched around, but they didn't find anything. No animal. No person. Just disturbed dirt under the RV and a few strange smears that looked too dark to be mud. Eddie and Lisa left immediately. As they pulled out, Eddie glanced in the side mirror. Ray stood in his sight watching them, shovel leaning against his rig. He raised one hand in a slow wave. And behind him, hanging from his fifth wheel's ladder, Eddie saw something that wasn't there the day before. A wind chime. Made of small, pale pieces that looked a little too much like bone. Some RV parks feel like they've been forgotten by time. This one was like it had been forgotten on purpose. I was driving through a rainy stretch of highway in early spring, trying to reach a city 2 hours away before midnight. But the weather turned ugly. Hard rain, thick fog, and wind strong enough to push my trailer. I saw a faded sign for an RV campground and took the exit. I didn't want to keep driving in that mess. The park was barely lit. The office was dark. A sign on the door said, "After hours check-in, site board." I found a cork board under an awning with site numbers on paper. Most were crossed out. Only a couple were available. I picked one, filled out the envelope with cash like the instructions said, and dropped it into the slot. My site was near the far edge, close to a line of trees swaying in the wind. Rain hammered my roof while I leveled and hooked up. The whole time I had that uneasy feeling of being watched, but I blamed it on the darkness and the storm. Inside, my trailer felt extra small. The rain was loud, and the wind made the walls groan. I turned on my little radio, an old habit. I like having background noise when I'm alone. The radio crackled, scanning through stations, mostly static and far-off music. Then it landed on a voice. Not music. Not an ad. A man's voice speaking clearly. "If anyone can hear this," the voice said, "do not come outside." I froze, hands still on the dial. The voice continued calm but strained. "Stay in your vehicle. Lock your doors. Do not answer if you hear someone calling." Static hissed, then the voice returned. "I'm in the office. I can see them moving between the rigs. They don't like the light. They're waiting." My stomach tightened. My first thought was that it was a prank broadcast, like some local Halloween thing. But this wasn't Halloween. And the voice didn't sound like an actor. It sounded tired. Scared. Like someone trying not to panic. The voice said, "If you're parked near the trees, turn off your inside lights. They can see you." My eyes flicked toward my window blinds. I hadn't closed them completely. My interior light was on. I reached out and turned off the main light instantly, plunging myself into dimness. Only the small stove light and my phone glow remained. Rain hammered the roof. The voice on the radio crackled again. "They've done this before," it said. "They come when people stop for the night. They pretend to be campers. They pretend to need help." My mouth went dry. I wanted to turn the radio off. I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard any of it. But my hand wouldn't move. The voice continued, "If you hear knocking, don't answer. If you hear your name, don't answer. If you hear someone crying, don't." Static cut it off. For a moment, the radio was just a wall of hiss. Then a new sound came through. Not a station. A low tone. Like open air on a microphone. And then breathing. Someone was breathing into the broadcast. Slow, wet breathing. My skin prickled. I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, and then I heard it outside. A knock. 3 taps, gentle as ever. On my door. I held my breath. 3 taps again. Then a voice from outside, thin and trembling, like a woman trying not to cry. "Please," the voice said. "I'm cold. Let me in." I stayed completely still. The voice tried again, closer. "Please. I can't find my husband. I'm lost." Rain drummed. Wind howled. The voice sounded so real. So human. It took everything in me not to move. Then, from the radio, the man's voice returned in a sudden burst, like he'd forced his way back onto the frequency. "Don't open it," he shouted, voice cracking. "They're right there." Static swallowed him. Outside, the woman's voice softened, turning coaxing. "I see you," she whispered. "I know you're awake." My heart hammered so hard I thought it would shake the trailer. Her tone changed slightly, less scared, more certain. "Open up," she said, almost bored now. The door handle jiggled once. Then again. And then, very faintly, I heard a sound that made my stomach drop. A second set of knocks. Not on the door. On the side of the trailer, beside my bed. 3 taps. I backed away from the wall like it was hot. The woman outside laughed softly. "You can't hide," she said. "We can hear you." The radio hissed again, and then a different voice came through, too close to the mic, whispering. "Let us in." I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys and moved to the driver's side of the truck, which was hitched to the trailer. If they got inside the trailer, I wanted an escape. I crept into the cab and locked the doors, crouching low so I wasn't visible through the windshield. My phone shook as I dialed 911. No service. Of course. The rain and the trees and the dead zone. Outside, the knocking continued, patient, rhythmic. Like they could do this all night. Then I heard footsteps in the wet gravel, slow circles around my rig. And with the rain, I heard another sound mixed in, like soft humming. A tune I couldn't place, but it made the hair on my arms rise. The radio in the truck suddenly crackled to life on its own. I hadn't turned it on. The same man's voice came through, barely audible. If you're in a white truck, he whispered, don't move. They watch for movement. I went cold because my truck was white. The voice continued, I don't know how long I can keep this up. They come to the office last. They like when you're scared first. I whispered without thinking, who are you? The radio hissed. Then the man answered like he'd heard me. I used to run this place, he said softly. Before they made it quiet. A shadow moved past my windshield, tall and close, blocking the faint campground light. I stayed frozen, barely breathing. The shadow paused right in front of my truck. And then I heard a tap 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 on my driver window. 3 taps. I squeezed my eyes shut. In the radio, the man's voice suddenly became frantic again. They know you're listening, he whispered. Turn it off. Turn it off right now. I reached trembling toward the radio knob. But before I could touch it, a loud bang hit the truck door, making me flinch. The woman's voice spoke inches from the glass, no longer pretending to be scared. You can't call anyone, she said. You can only open up. The radio screamed with static, then cleared for one last sentence from the man. If you hear them laugh, he said, voice breaking, it means they found the door that. Static swallowed him. Outside, the woman laughed softly. And then, behind her laughter, I heard another laugh, deeper, rougher, coming from somewhere near the trees. Then another. Like multiple people laughing at once, surrounding my rig in the rain. That's when I did the only thing I could think of. I hit the horn. I leaned on it, holding it down until my chest hurt. The campground exploded with sound, long, angry horn blasts cutting through the storm. The laughter stopped instantly. Footsteps scattered in the gravel, fast now, no longer calm. I kept the horn going, over and over, like a signal flare made of noise. After maybe 30 seconds, I saw lights flicker on in a rig 2 sites away. Then another. A door opened somewhere. Someone shouted, "What the hell?" The shadows retreated toward the trees. And then, silence again, except for rain. I waited a full 5 minutes before I dared to move. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. When I finally stopped honking, the park felt like it was holding its breath. I drove out. I didn't unhook. I didn't pack. I just pulled forward, dragging the trailer like it was part of a getaway. As I passed the office, I saw something through the rain. A figure inside, behind the glass. A man. He pressed his face to the window like he was trying to see me. I couldn't tell if it was real or just my headlights and the storm. But as I rolled past, the radio crackled one last time. And the man's voice whispered, soft and final, "Don't come back." I didn't. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty stretches, my radio will flicker with static. And in the hiss, I'll hear faint, patient knocking. 3 taps. Like a signal. Like a promise. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories. If you want to send your story, you can send at belladarktales@gmail.com. I have also pasted it into the description.